got from Hiram Clark. Beast got from Hiram Clark. Beast got from Hiram Clark. Beast got from Hiram Clark.
Welcome to the B Block Podcast. I appreciate you for joining me. I am your host, Brandon Scott. And this is an exciting time, an exciting episode. I'm really glad to be here, man, because we're recording this thing on a Wednesday, late afternoon, early evening. And so that puts us at, 4 days? 4 days ahead of the Texans season opener. Just 1 day ahead of the NFL season opening overall. And, man, it is just an amazing time, man, an electric time. I just came from NRG Stadium earlier in the day. Got to hear from DeMeco Ryans. Of course, Wednesday is quarterback day, so got to hear from CJ Stroud. Also got to interact with a couple of players in the locker room, so I'll bring you some thoughts on that, or really just some overall thoughts going into this game, going into week one, where my head is at as we sit here now. Now, I mentioned that it's Wednesday. Bobby Slowick and Matt Burke, the offensive and defensive coordinators, respectively, are going to talk on Thursday. And if they say anything that I find worthwhile or worth recording and talking about, I'll do so. But for now, consider this your official or unofficial, however you want to look at it, Texans-Colts week one preview and the things that I'm most looking forward to or most watching out for. Now, I want to get to, and this is part of it, get to the news of the day, what I felt like was the news of the day. And this has kind of been a theme throughout the week, just monitoring Will Anderson's ankle injury and his situation, his availability, how active he would be in practice, and whether he would be available for this game. And if he is available for the game, how limited or not limited will he be? Will there be a snap count? Will they be managing him a particular way? And I felt like we got some insight into that on Wednesday. Of course, DeMeco Ryans is old school in this way where he clearly just is not of the frame of mind to be talking about injuries in depth. Like if there's an injury that's been announced or that's kind of like formally out there, he'll acknowledge it, but he's not one that's about talking about injuries. And then you saw the injury report, or if you didn't see the injury report, the Texans released their, what I guess would be their first injury report of the season, of the regular season, on Wednesday, and only MJ Stewart was on it. And of course, MJ Stewart is a backup safety. You'd like to have MJ Stewart out there or available to you, given what happened to the safeties last year. But it's not like that's going to be earth-shattering or heartbreaking for you if that's the one player that's on the injury report throughout the rest of the week. I think it's a good sign that the first one would show Will Anderson Jr. not on it, given the fact that he's been dealing with this ankle injury for some time now. And it even goes back to last year, just the idea of the fact that he's had some ankle issues. So that was something that I was going to be watching out for anyway. And I feel like I can watch a little I would say I can watch more so just for his performance straight up and a little less so about the ankle, just based off of the way that they communicated on Wednesday. Now, DeMeco Ryans, again, did not say much, but Will Anderson Jr. in the locker room seemed pretty clear about playing and even talked about feeling healthier and as close to fully healthy as you can be after you've been dealing with the type of injury that he's been dealing with. He said that he felt pretty comfortable in comparison to the Colts game that he last played, right? If you remember the end of the season when the Texans beat the Colts, Will Anderson Jr. played in that game, but was really limited and was dealing with an ankle injury, which he's dealing with now, but looks like he's going to be playing and should not be limited. I will go into the game with a normal Will Anderson sort of standard evaluation of how he plays and what he looks like. I've talked about this on Sports Radio 610 quite a bit, that the ankle injury, obviously any kind of injury is worrisome, but the ankle injury with Will specifically is worrisome because the thing that makes him so special, aside from like some of the intangible stuff, like he's got a leadership quality about him, an it factor quality about him, and all of those things are well and good. But just in terms of just being a football player, the thing that makes Will Anderson special is how quickly he gets off the ball. Like how quickly he moves when the ball is snapped is special. It's special. It's unique. I think it was elite right away. Like he came into the league, I think elite at that specific thing. Now, what we saw over the course of time, over the course of the season, was that his lack of repertoire or pass rush moves, I think, kept or caught up to him, is what I'm trying to say. I think it caught up to him in a sense of not being able to finish plays. And eventually, again, he dealt with that ankle injury. But I get the sense that he's added a lot more to that between the work that he's done with Myles Garrett, the tutelage under Danielle Hunter since he's been with the Texans since they signed him in free agency. I feel like those are two guys who he's talked about quite a bit who have done a lot for him in terms of developing pass rush moves beyond that initial point that makes him such a gifted and special and unique player. So I'm excited to see, if you want to get real football nerdy, excited to see what kind of repertoire, what kind of counters and pass rush moves that Will Anderson has developed from year one to year two. But again, the thing that makes him unique and special is that get off when the ball is snapped. And so if the ankle was going to be an issue, that was something that would obviously be an issue for me and an issue for Texans fans who are watching, something to be mindful of and to monitor throughout the game. Something I would imagine they would be mindful of and monitoring throughout the game. But I don't think that's going to be as big of an issue. I'm not going to say it's a non-issue because that injury does exist. It is there. But based off of how he talked and how DeMeco Ryans talked, and he's not one to give you a lot on that type of thing either way. But I did not get the sense, I did not get the vibe that Will Anderson is going to be on some type of pitch count, snap count, limited, anything like that. I think they're going to let him go out there and ball. That is my sense of things. And so that is a big deal. Why is it a big deal? Well, you're talking about dealing with, at the very least, a quarterback and running back dynamic between Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor that I don't think Will Anderson Jr. is necessarily going to be the key to stopping those guys. But I feel like the more really good football players you have on the field, and especially closer to the line of scrimmage, the better off that you are going up against those two guys, because we understand Anthony Richardson, dynamic quarterback when he's right, or at least has the potential to be. But the one thing that they present to you that's got to be scary is the ability to gas you. Like Jonathan Taylor, more so between the tackles, and Anthony Richardson, whether it's scrambling or designed runs, just the type of athlete that is very rare, as we know, very rare at that position. So look, and I think I mentioned this probably in the last episode, if not, then certainly on the air on the radio. Not having guys like Will Anderson Jr. or a limited version of Will Anderson Jr. would worry me in a matchup like this. The fact, and I'll get to this a little bit later, but the fact that they're missing Christian Harris and Denico Autry, I think, is a little bit worrisome if you're a Texans fan. And again, I'll get to that a little bit later. But the good news, and I think the big piece of news from, again, the week and from the day, is that Will Anderson Jr. is going to play in this game and seemingly will be able to play without a snap. And even if there is a snap count, it looks like Will, at the very least, feels like he's up for it, like he's up for the game, as opposed to, dealing with a bum ankle. So that was the big piece of news. I think earlier in the day, the big piece of news, you could probably even argue that this is the news of the day if you like, because I understand it's at the most important position, not just in the in NFL, but arguably in team sports, the quarterback position. But it is the Texans' backup quarterback position, Davis Mills. This was reported early in the morning from ESPN's Adam Schefter, NFL Network's Ian Rappaport, and all of our local guys also were able to jump on this, and we were able to talk to Davis Mills about his contract extension. He's been extended through the 2025 season and the language that I got was at $5 million per. So my understanding was that they were giving him a bump this year and paying him $5 million next. That was the understanding that I got from the language of the report. Now, if I'm wrong on that, y'all forgive me and y'all can check me on it. But that's a massive raise for your boy. A massive raise for your boy. I don't think there's no way he was making over $2 million. I probably should have looked this up, but I'm very familiar with what what a third round rookie contract would be worth. That is not in the 5 millions. I can tell you that for sure. So it's a good day for Davis Mills. There was a funny interaction with Davis Mills, who has been I should point this out, has been a soldier and really a good sport throughout everything. When he was playing, when he's not, when the focus is on him, when the focus clearly is not. Like he is a consummate professional. I can't really give him enough credit for that. But I thought this was a funny moment with Davis Mills, where at some point in his comments, when he's talking to us, we kind of got a media scrum around his locker earlier in the day. And at some point, he says something to the effect of, "I'm not sure if this makes me a veteran now yet, or if I'm a veteran now yet." And I'm like, bruh, what do you mean you don't know if you're a veteran right now? Like, I was like, man, this is the type of stuff that make them pass over you for Case Keenum in the middle of the season when they need to go to their backup quarterback, which of course we don't believe is going to happen this year. Something happened to CJ Stroud. They need a quarterback. Davis Mills, especially if healthy, is going to be the guy. So I'm not saying that that's going to happen again, but it was some insight into like, yo, man, what you mean you don't know if you're a veteran yet? Like you the veteran in the room. You the veteran voice in CJ Stroud's head. I know he's got his coaches. I know he's got Bobby Slowick. I know he's got Gerard Johnson. I know Bill Lazor's there. Obviously, DeMeco's the head coach. I understand that, and Case is still around. I understand that there are other voices, other leaders around that team and that offense. But you, especially today, after you get that contract that solidifies you're the backup quarterback for this season and more than likely next season as well, because they paid you like such. What you mean you think you a veteran now, dog? You are a veteran. So it was to me, a funny moment that I'll remember. And I was sure to do this too. And once we finished the scrum, I think he was talking, and when we finished our scrum, Aaron Wilson from KPRC held Davis for a little longer to get like a little bit more of an exclusive interview, which is fine. I mean, we all do this. So I waited until after he was done, because I didn't want to awkwardly make this point to him. But off to the side, I went straight up to Davis at his locker and was like, "Hey, man, we all are around here get paid a lot." I didn't say this part, but I was thinking this part. I'll tell you what I said. I'm thinking in my head, man, a lot of us are around here getting paid a lot less just to cover this team, just to talk about this team, write about this team, whatever it is, take pictures, video, whatever it is that you do in the media. We all make a whole lot less than $5 million to be around. And most of us have been doing it for a while. Davis, dog, they just paid you. They just gave you a raise after you've been there. Now this is year 4. And they gave you a raise. Bruh. And this is what I told him. I went up to him straight up. I said, "Hey, man, look, you got your second contract. You's a veteran. All right." And we dapped up, and he, said appreciate it and everything. But that was just kind of like me thinking, does this dude not know who he is? That like Davis Mills, aside, no matter what you think about his game, aside from his game, which is probably has always been better than the naysayers said it was, and not nearly as good as his most staunch supporters said it was, is why he was polarizing up until CJ Stroud got here. But no matter what you think about Davis Mills, this is my hope, my wish, and my prayer for that young man as he continues on his journey over the next couple of years. Man, know who you are. Be aware of who you are. And I get it. Backup, who is he? Backup quarterback. CJ Stroud's the guy. I get it. I understand what a lot of y'all are probably thinking. But dog, you the veteran backup quarterback, a voice in CJ Stroud's ear Okay, and you're gonna have an opportunity here to make a lot of money, bare minimum, especially if this goes right. And so far, it looks like it has. Like the fact that they gave him this money, or awarded him this money, like you have an opportunity to have a career as a backup, make millions of dollars, and probably eventually parlay that into a coaching job, a broadcasting job, whatever it is that his heart desires. The world is at Davis Mills' feet right now, dog. Like in an ideal world, CJ Stroud stays healthy and you never have to play. You get to collect the checks and again be the voice or a voice in his ear. Be a part of a team that has an opportunity to do something special. Bruh, you are a veteran. Stand with your back straight and speak with your chest out. You got that second contract. You know what I mean? How many people, how many even third round picks? How many people fail in this league and don't make it to that second contract? Come on, Davis. You are that guy. The backup quarterback solidified. Like, kill that conversation, right? Case gone, injured, Davis paid. We know who the guy is. So, yeah, that was a fun interaction. Aside from that, I know I kind of rambled about that for a second, but aside from that, I can appreciate even the fact that Davis's game has improved. Like again, we got stands, or we had stands for a while, and we got people that's just like, man, he's the worst quarterback I ever seen, which is ridiculous. But you can see how his game has developed and grown over time. There were some moments early in training camp that didn't look great, but it was early in training camp. There were a lot of guys that didn't look great. I'm pretty sure we pointed it out on the radio, but overall, I feel like, this is something that a lot of us talk about who cover the team. His footwork is better. His accuracy looks to me to be a bit better, and it's probably because of the footwork. And again, the only thing that I'm hoping for Davis Mills is that swag turns up, that confidence goes through the roof. My man got married over the offseason, just got paid today. So turn your swag on, Davis Mills. Turn your swag on. I don't care what they say about you. Now, this was my big takeaway from the press conference on Wednesday. And I went into it trying to get a sense for how much of an emphasis it is for this team to get off on a quick start, on a fast start. How much of an emphasis is it for them to put it better, how much of an emphasis is it for them to set the tone early with explosive plays? That was my big thing. How much do they truly desire to set the tone from the very beginning with explosive plays? And I asked that and I wonder that because for a couple of reasons. It was a theme of the games last year, right? It was a theme of the games last year. If you remember, Anthony Richardson in that first game in week 2 at NRG Stadium, the one that the Colts won, Anthony Richardson set the tone very early in that game by busting open a couple of runs for touchdowns and some explosive plays. And he was okay with his arm as well, if I mention, if you don't mind me mentioning it. Like early explosive plays for the Colts. We all remember how the Texans opened that last game against the Colts, the one in the regular season that got them into the playoffs. We all remember that deep shot to from CJ Stroud to Nico Collins. We all remember that. And that was 100% about them wanting to set the tone. 100% about the offense and CJ Stroud in particular. Okay. But the offense wanting to punch the Colts in the mouth immediately. Immediately. I know this. So I was curious, and especially given the fact that Anthony Richardson didn't play in that second game, Jonathan Taylor didn't play in the first game. Okay. And so now everybody's whole, or should be whole at least, in this matchup. The back and forth trash talk between Zaire Franklin, the Colts linebacker, and CJ Stroud about how CJ's never beaten Anthony. Like Zaire Franklin had the nerve to fix his mouth to say that, and I truly wonder. I wish I had a chance to ask CJ this today. I didn't because I I was in the locker room when CJ Stroud took the podium and mistakenly did not realize that he was actually kind of moved up from the time that they told us. So I get into the CJ Stroud press conference a little late, and it's kind of in poor form to start asking questions when you weren't there for the beginning. You don't know what's already been asked. And of course, if you're late, somebody noticed you were late, and so it just is not a good look. So of course you just kind of sit there and you listen. But earlier in the afternoon, DeMeco Ryan, maybe I guess an hour before or so, DeMeco Ryans was up, and I did ask him about this very thing. If there's an emphasis, how much of an emphasis, if at all, there is on setting the tone early and being the ones to throw the first punch, for lack of a better term. And DeMeco, I like this dynamic that's going on here because the two of these guys, DeMeco and CJ Stroud, I feel like they communicate this thing differently and look at this thing differently, but somehow also view it the same way. Like both of them want to set the tone early. Both of them want to finish the game off strong. But DeMeco more so wants to be the last man standing. DeMeco wants to be the one to be able to say at the end, after the punches are thrown on both sides, hey, we were the toughest team and we were the last man standing. And that makes sense from a head coach. That makes sense from a defensive minded guy. That makes sense from a former linebacker who played at a high level, which, of course, DeMeco Ryans is all of those things. CJ Stroud, by contrast, but still with the same goal in mind, very much wants to throw that first punch, very much wants to hit you in the mouth before you get a chance to hit him in the mouth. Understanding that there's a good chance that he might get hit back. But just to kind of go with the fighting metaphor, CJ Stroud wants to throw the first punch. And the way I know, well, I know this just from talking to enough people from, that are around him on the team, but also when he was asked about, and I was pleasantly surprised that this ended up being his answer. But when he was asked about like the particular thing that he felt like he got better at or wanted, I'm sorry, not got better at, but wants to be better at this year, aside from the obvious of winning and achieving the overall team goals, like if there's something very specific that he wanted to focus on, the thing that he volunteered was getting off to faster starts, striking first, like starting off fast, not just in this one particular game, which is what I was focused on. And if I had asked the question, it would have been something that I would have been more focused on. But I prefer this answer anyway. Wants to set the tone, wants to get off the fast starts, really just period, as kind of a part of their identity as a team, as an edict. They just want to, or CJ Stroud specifically wants them as an offense and as a team to strike early and obviously strike often, but to set the tone very early on. That's what that first play against the Colts was about to end the season. And that's what CJ Stroud is sort of about generally. And I like this because again, both CJ Stroud and DeMeco Ryans, I don't want to like make it a versus. Both of them want to set the tone early and want to finish game strong. But with one of them, with CJ specifically, you got the guy that is emphasizing the early start. And with Ryans, the coach, you got him emphasizing the strong finish. Now, I think it's perfect. This is the way I would want it, for it to be the quarterback that thinks the way that he thinks in this case, and for it to be the head coach, specifically a defensive minded head coach who played linebacker at a high level, but for the head coach, whoever he is, to think the way that DeMeco Ryans thinks. Like I much prefer it be this way than the other way around. The player to be the one that wants to be aggressive and wants to attack early on and set the tone, and for the coach to be the one with a little bit more of a bird's eye view that says, hey, yeah, of course we want to set the tone, but you know what we really want to do? We want to be the last team standing at the end. And that's what they ended up being in Indianapolis. But let's be real. Like they did not probably finish that game exactly the way they wanted to. Like Jonathan Taylor was able to run the ball all over him for much of the game. And if Jonathan Taylor, you could argue if Jonathan Taylor is simply in the game, they make that play at the end. And who knows what happens from there. But it was the talk of the towns, if you will, both in Houston and Indianapolis, how a third string running back ended up being the one who had his number called in that moment when Jonathan Taylor had run for 500 yards that day. I think it was closer to, on the higher 100 side, like close to 200. But you get the point. So that is just a somewhat of a more of a, I would say, gamesmanship type of observation, a mentality type of observation. Just like a vibe check. How do they view themselves, and how do they view the game? And that was an interesting thing that I noticed, just being a difference. But now you could say that DeMeco feels exactly the same way as CJ. Maybe he was just putting on a little bit for the media and not wanting to, or wanting to have balanced comments of saying, yeah, we want to start fast, but we really want to be the ones that finish strong. But I definitely get the sense that there's this perfect, or I would say, if not perfect, a favorable balance between the two, of the young gunslinger that wants to go out there and make plays, who might even be a little greedy at times in trying to make plays, and the coach that's just like, let's just be steady and let's be ready at the end after everybody is done throwing their punches. So that was an interesting part of being around on Wednesday. I will say a big thing for me before I get to a couple of others is just missing Christian Harris and Denico Autry. I brought that up earlier in the show. I brought it up quite a bit on the air. I think that this is a classic game that they will. I'm not going to say that they will miss these guys. I think they will. We'll see how the guys that play behind them actually step up. But this is a better way to put it. Would be to say this would be a classic game in which they could use these type of guys. I think that's fair to say. Christian, so for different reasons, different positions, obviously. Christian Harris, because when you're facing a quarterback of Anthony Richardson's athletic caliber, and somebody who can and is capable of hurting you both with his legs and through the air, like the ability, or to have someone with the ability to defend sideline to sideline, an athletic linebacker like Christian Harris, I think is extremely valuable. And we talked about it, man. I don't feel like they've got exactly a guy that can replicate that. Now, DeMeco Ryans did talk about how it's not necessary for the guys that are supposed to step up, the Henry Tortoras and Jake Hansons of the world, Phillips, the rookie ends up getting time, Jamal Hill. Like, I don't know exactly how much of a rotation or what the depth chart is supposed to look like, how often guys will play, or how many snaps they will ultimately play at linebacker. It'll be worth monitoring. But it is fair to say that they don't exactly have a dude quite like Christian Harris. And I mean that's just a fact. They don't have a dude quite like Christian Harris. DeMeco talked about those guys not having to be him, but just doing their job, and that part should be good enough. That's also DeMeco's job to DeMeco and Matt Burke's job to come up with a plan that these guys can execute, and they simply execute. You don't necessarily need them to be otherworldly or some kind of talent that they don't necessarily possess or that they aren't necessarily about. So I'm interested to see how they pick up the slack with that, with Christian Harris out. Denico Autry, I would point out as somebody, obviously, who they like to play inside and out, but one of the true dogs on the team, from what we understand, one of the true, like, real badasses on the team. And I feel like when you go up against the Colts and you talk about football being won in the trenches on both sides of the ball, like, you want to win in the trenches, I do feel like that is going to be a worthwhile matchup for the Texans. How their offensive line deals with the Colts defensive line, primarily Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner, and those guys just being the forces that they are. I'll get to that in a moment. But then also on the defensive line, in terms of not having Denico Autry, like, that's somebody you cannot tell me that the Texans would not like to have going up against a formidable Colts offensive line and a rushing attack that features one of the best running backs in the league and one of the best athletes we've probably ever seen at the quarterback position, which, again, whether you think Anthony Richardson is going to be good or not, he is that. He is one of the better athletes that we've seen at the quarterback position, just because they don't they don't really typically make quarterbacks like that. So to me, not having Denico Autry in a scenario like that is a blemish. It hurts. And so I'm interested in how the guys behind him or around, their interior defensive line by committee between, Mario Edwards, Foley Fatukasi, Tim Settle, just the entire depth chart of the interior defensive line, how it holds up against a very respectable Colts offensive line. And I'll be honest, I have not looked at their injury report yet, but just expecting everybody to be ready to go. That will be a fascinating matchup. And again, it does help that Will Anderson is going to be out there. Got to lay eyes on Daniil Hunter again, pretty up close and personal. In terms of just being in the locker room, didn't talk to him, just saw him. And I think the Texans themselves posted a picture maybe earlier in the day of like Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter walking next to each other. And I get it, man. They're all, impressive dudes in terms of like just physical specimens and all of that. And we get the work that they put in. But man, there is a vibe there with those two as your ends where you just feel good about it, especially if they're healthy. You feel good about it. What's that interior going to look like, especially in a game like this with no Denico Autry? I am fascinated to watch it. Since I mentioned Christian Harris, I want to bring up Henry To'oTo'o because I did get to talk to him, and y'all probably saw plenty of clips on social media of different reporters, different media members talking with Henry To'oTo'o. So he was a very available and high in demand interview on Wednesday, but I got to chat it up with him as well. And I think he is tremendously aware of what his shortcomings were last year, the things that he needed to work on, both within his game and primarily with his body. When he talked to Landry Landry Locker talked to him, and he called himself a fat ass, which I wish he had given me that kind of colorful of a quote. I maybe I came across a little bit too serious for him, but he told me essentially the same thing. He just didn't call himself a fat ass, but essentially he had not adopted really the NFL player's diet, the professional athlete diet and training regimen that he was able to do over this offseason. And there is something to be said for a guy going from his rookie year to having his first professional offseason and what that can do for your game. So, look, Henry To'oTo'o is going to have more opportunities with Christian Harris out for these first few weeks. I know they don't play the exact same position, but play it. To Henry's credit, he played quite a bit as a rookie and has some experience out there. And as somebody that they talked about, spoke very, very highly of early on in his rookie year, or even before the year started, like in training camp and preseason, you would hear his name ring out a little bit for a rookie that wasn't one of their top picks. And he's one of the guys that I talk about quite a bit when I talk about these Alabama guys just being really impressive. Well, Henry, to his credit, realized that he wasn't as impressive as maybe I was giving him credit for, as maybe as he thought, because he had to go this offseason and really work on his body and nutrition and what he put into it. So is that gonna make him better in cover, faster in coverage? Is that gonna make him stronger? He talked about his core being stronger. Is that gonna make him better against the run? Be able to get off blocks better? What is gonna be the net effect of Henry To'oTo'o treating his body better? I don't know, but I'm interested to see it because he's got that opportunity in front of him. Big opportunity here for Henry To'oTo'o to kind of establish himself over these next few weeks while Christian Harris is out. He even mentioned this. It was one of the first things he mentioned was like just observing last year how Blake Cashman was able to seize the opportunity, take advantage of the op, and then go out there and get a decent contract from the Minnesota Vikings. Right. So there's a lot of motivation, and you better believe that dudes are watching. Even like a dude like Davis Mills gets paid. If you're a backup, obviously that's a quarterback situation, it's different. But if you're a backup, you're like, you know what, man, if I can if I can star in my role, not to say that Davis has starred as a backup necessarily, but he has been kind of a consummate professional, which is one of the things that you want your backup quarterback to be. But it's like if I star in my role, or if I maximize my op, man, there is something on the other side for me. And I think that is something that is front of mind for Henry To'oTo'o because he mentioned it, he brought it up, he talked about it. Watching Blake Cashman last year go from a relatively unknown, not to a household name, but again, somebody that was in demand for a contract with the Vikings. So big opportunity for Henry To'oTo'o. I think that they're going to need him. Very interested to see how these linebackers play, because it's one of the issues that we talk about, not being exactly sure of the depth. And I think if To'oTo'o had played a little bit better last year as a rookie, we'd feel a lot better about the position. But some of the things that he talked about, which resulted in him not necessarily playing at the level of his full potential, or maybe what the expectation was, I think that's part of the reason why the feeling about that position is not necessarily the highest. But Henry To'oTo'o has played good football, does have some really good traits, and I'm excited about the opportunity for bro. I'm excited about the opportunity. Now, would I like for Christian Harris to be out there? I don't want to. I don't want to pretend like like I'm just cool with it. Like, oh, yeah, no Christian Harris, no problem. I think it is a problem. But as far as Henry goes, I want to see if we're watching a different player than what we saw as a rookie. Now, speaking of different players, and I'm going to end with this guy who was a different player than he was as a rookie. That's Kenyon Green. Okay. And I think that it is a very, very positive development that Kenyon Green was able to get through training camp and the preseason without really being a talking point at all. He and I talked about this today, of like how, hey man, if offensive lineman is not doing his job, or if he's not available, or whatever it is, if there's some kind of controversy, then hey, we talking about it. But all the offensive lineman got to do to not be a talking point at all is just do his damn job. You go out there and you just do your job, man, everybody forget about you. You kind of just out of sight, out of mind. It's not a glorious or glamorous position, at least not for the public anyway. The football folks celebrate it, we understand. But basically, if you are offensive lineman and you getting your ass kicked, we can see that. If you are offensive lineman and you kicking ass, say you pancaking or whatever it is, we can see that. But if you just an offensive lineman that's just being solid, that's holding their blocks, that's protecting the quarterback, that's creating rush lanes and doing all of the things that an offensive lineman is supposed to do, if you just doing it, stop talking. We kind of just move on and go on to the next conversation piece, because most people are not really qualified or equipped to really break down the nuances of offensive line play. And nor do you really want to do that, right? Like, especially if it's like, unless it's one of those things, you getting your ass whooped or you whooping ass. What we really talking about here, man? What we really talking about? And for Kenyon, he's done a little ass kicking here and there in the preseason, but for the most part, it's been, man, he not getting beat. Man, he's not an issue. He's a non-issue, actually. And just looking at him today, and being around him a little bit, it's cool to see that. Obviously, from the football standpoint, from a performance standpoint, it's good to see that his body is right. We talked a lot about that in the preseason and during training camp and all of that, about his body looking to just transformed, looking totally different from what he looked like really, his rookie year and in training camp, or preseason and training camp going into his second year, and how he looks now. But really the difference being him getting his mind right, like had to really just check his mentals and to kind of like give himself, he didn't, these are not his words. These are my own words based off of talking to him. I think he had to give himself a little bit of grace. Like he knew and understands things were going probably in the wrong direction for him. And I think that he just had to do something just to create a mentality that was not like feeding the negative of reality, right? Like sometimes you got to just get out of your own head. Maybe the reality is a negative, but if you change your outlook on it, you can change the way. If you change your outlook, you can change the outcome, right? And that's not all he needed to do, right? He needed to change his outlook, and with that, go ahead and fix your body and get your mind right and do everything that you need to do. But I say all that to say, Kenyon Green looks great, appears like he's ready to go, from a mental standpoint. And I always like to point this out when I talk about him, and it's even more fitting in this situation because they're playing the Colts. The last time Kenyon Green played a regular season game was the last game of his rookie season in 2022 at the Indianapolis Colts. The first game that he'll play since then will be the season opener in year 3 after taking the entire year 2 off. Season opener in year 3 at the Indianapolis Colts. The thing that nobody talks about with Kenyon Green, because he had to get his body right, because he had all of those injuries, because he missed the entire season last year. And so it was all negative. All the energy and all of the conversation was all negative about dude. And I get it. I understand why. But the thing that got overlooked with all of that was that I did feel like, or not even feel like, I saw, without trying to be like offensive line guru, because certainly that I am not, but I saw him making the strides toward the end of the season. It wasn't all, to use a Bill O'Brien quote that that most of us like knee deep Texans people are familiar with. It wasn't all horse shit. All right. It wasn't all horse shit on offense, guy. It wasn't all horseshit at left guard when Kenyon Green played. Now there was some horseshit. I'm not gonna say that none of it existed. And I think if he's honest with you, he'd tell you that he experienced some growing pains too. We all saw it, man. It's on tape. It's on TV. They play the games on TV. We all saw it. But at the end, I don't think we gave enough credit to, and we did not think about, because at the time folks didn't want him to win the game, myself included, didn't want him to win the game because wanted him to have the number 1 overall pick, really to take whatever quarterback they heart desired. I maintain this. I don't want to go on a tangent on this, but I'm still team lose that game, get the number 1 overall pick, and draft your quarterback. At the time, yeah, I was singing that Bryce Young song, but I was perfectly fine with taking C.J. Stroud. I liked all 3 of the quarterbacks at the top of the draft. So you're not gonna never be able to call me somebody that didn't believe in any of these cats. And if I'm wrong, I'm gonna be wrong in the other direction of them not being good. I liked them all. I just wanted them to have the number 1 pick so they could powwow and decide who was the best one to take. I don't thank Lovie Smith for winning that game, or Davis, or Jonathan Grenard. I don't thank none of them for winning that game, man. I thank the Carolina Panthers for not picking C.J. Stroud. But I digress on that. The point that I'm making on Kenyon Green is, in that game, and because we were not focused on, hey, who played well, because that's not what that game was about, you go back and look at it. Kenyon Green, not bad. It was not horseshit. It was not horseshit in that final week for Kenyon Green in his rookie year. Now, what was horseshit was him having to deal with all of those injuries, him perhaps not being aware or mature enough, whatever the right word is, to take care of his body like a professional, and just not being there yet. Like, that part you could say was horseshit. But his actual performance in that game was not. And now he's had an entire season, 2 off seasons and 1 full season removed from that game to develop his overall character, as a football player, as a man. And let's see what that looks like, man. We had all these questions about the Texans' interior offensive line. I think we've got less questions now about it. We had all of these questions about their interior defensive line. I think we still probably have some questions about that, and especially with Denico Autry not really being in the mix because of the suspension. But, hey, man, all of this talking we do, I didn't talk 45 minutes about this, man. And guess what? They get to show it on Sunday. We could quit all of this talking for a little bit. I'll be back to talk some more. I will be around all season to talk my shit here on the B Block podcast. But man, I cannot tell y'all how ready I am for this week 1 matchup between the Colts and the Texans. I think the Texans, a lot of hype that is well deserved, and the Colts, I think, are being slept on in part because we're not sure exactly what Anthony Richardson is, and because the Texans are also the flavor of the month. But let's see how it all unfolds, man. Like I said, if Bobby Slowick or Matt Burke says something interesting enough for me to come back on here and rap with y'all about it, if I got some thoughts on it, which I probably will, I will be back to do that. I'm also hoping to get in some Astro stuff before the week is over with, because a lot of really interesting stuff is happening over there between Kyle Tucker's injury, actual injury being revealed, Justin Verlander 3 starts in, not exactly looking the way you want that to look. Spencer Arrighetti apparently, and I didn't get to see this because I was kind of preparing here for this podcast, but I'm gonna go back and check it out because I record everything. Spencer Arrighetti had a rough one after being really dominant for the last month to 2 months, for a while now, after a really rough start to the season. So I want to break bread with y'all on the Astros. We'll do that in another episode. Make sure in the meantime, y'all are subscribed to the B Block podcast. You can do that wherever it is that you get your podcast. We are also on YouTube, so check us out there as well. Make sure you subscribe, like, rate, review, all the things that they ask y'all to do to give some feedback on the podcast. Make sure that you do exactly that. In the meantime, it's your boy. I am Brandon Scott. I appreciate y'all again for joining me. And until next time, y'all be good.